Media fact-checker. Grace Tame's controversial comments on October 7 Hamas sexual violence allegations and her pro-Palestine activism. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Grace Tame dismissed reports of sexual violence during Hamas October 7, 2023 attacks on Israel as debunked propaganda in an ABC interview, Newskamau, ABC, Newskamau. The UN Special Representative on Sexual Violence in Conflict found reasonable grounds to believe conflict-related sexual violence, including rape and gang rape, occurred during the October 7 attacks, ABC, Newskamau. Hamas militants killed approximately 1,200 people and took 251 hostages during the October 7 attacks, Newskamau. Grace Tame led a chant of "Globalize the Intifada" at a protest against Israeli President Isaac Herzog's 2024 visit to Australia, Newskamau, ABC, Newskamau. The Israeli embassy accused Grace Tame of losing her moral compass for denying documented sexual violence and turning victims into perpetrators, Newskamau, ABC. But not all outlets told the same story. Newskamau, Article 1, states the October 7 attacks were the worst loss of Jewish life since the Holocaust, while ABC, Article 2, does not explicitly make this claim. Newskamau, Article 3, includes a direct quote from Grace Tame saying those things have been debunked about sexual violence reports, but ABC, Article 2, does not include this exact phrasing. Sky News host Shari Markson, cited in Newskamau Article 3, claims ABC host Hamish MacDonald barely challenged Tame, but ABC, Article 2, does not provide a detailed account of the interview's challenges. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Democrats impeach Florida AG Pam Bondi over Epstein files briefing refusal. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Democrats walked out of a closed-door briefing with Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi on Jeffrey Epstein files on Wednesday, calling it an outrageous fake hearing. Bondi refused to commit to testifying under oath despite a subpoena voted by the House Oversight Committee earlier this month. 5 Republicans joined Democrats in voting to subpoena Bondi to question the Justice Department's handling of Epstein investigation files. Bondi and Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche attended the briefing to address bipartisan frustration over the release of Epstein-related documents. California Congressman Robert Garcia called the briefing an outrageous fake hearing after Bondi's refusal to testify under oath. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states Bondi accused Democrats of using Epstein documents to distract from Trump's political successes, but Article 2 does not mention this specific accusation. Article 1 includes Bondi's alleged spying on Congress members while reviewing documents, which is not mentioned in Article 2. Article 2 lists unrelated live updates, e.g., Joe Kent's resignation, FBI location data, Iran war powers resolution, that are not part of the core story in Article 1. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. 2026 Six Nations Rugby Tournament Analysis and Player Selections. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Louis Bielbayari scored a record 9 tries in a single Six Nations season, including 4 against England, and became the first player to score in every game in successive championships. Thomas Ramos scored the decisive final winning penalty for France against England in Paris, marking his 4th successive championship as top point scorer and placing him atop France's all-time list. Rhys Carr scored a try in 3 successive test matches, becoming only the 6th prop in history to do so, and was Wales's leading point scorer in the 2026 Six Nations. Tommaso Menoncello scored a solo try in Italy's historic win against England and was praised for his speed, strength, and commitment as the best centre in Europe. Finn Russell was pivotal in Scotland's home wins over England and France, including a quick restart for Darcy Graham's crucial late try in Cardiff. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 names Louis Bielbayari as the player of the tournament, while Article 2 lists Thomas Ramos as the player of the tournament in multiple instances. Article 1 states Tommaso Menoncello is ranked 13th in the best 15, while Article 2 repeatedly ranks him as a podium contender for player of the tournament. Article 1 describes Joe Hayes as England's most improved player but does not mention his love of Johnny Cash or cooking with butter, which Article 2 highlights. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Nicola Olyslagers finishes as silver medalist in women's high jump at World Indoor Championships in Poland. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Nicola Olyslagers won silver in the women's high jump at the World Athletics Indoor Championships in Toruń, Poland. Jarosława Machuchik won gold in the women's high jump with a clearance of 2.01 meters. Olyslagers, Yulia Levchenko, Ukraine, and Angelina Topic, Serbia, shared silver after all clearing 1.99 meters on their first attempt. Olyslagers cleared 1.99 meters, equaling her indoor personal best. Eleanor Patterson, Australia, finished 7th with a clearance of 1.93 meters. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian reports Hayley Kitching's 800m heat time as 2 minutes and 0.99 seconds, while ABC reports it as 2 minutes and 0.09 seconds. The Guardian mentions Jess Hull's 1500m heat time as 4 minutes and 12.45 seconds but does not mention her advancing to the final, while ABC confirms her advancement with the same time. The Guardian notes Adam Spencer advanced to the men's 1,500-meter final with a time of 3 minutes and 40.79 seconds, but this detail is missing in ABC. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. US-Iran conflict escalation and its economic political fallout for Trump ahead of midterms. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Petrol prices in the US have risen by over 80 cents per gallon since the start of the Iran conflict. The Trump administration coordinated the release of 400 million barrels of emergency oil stocks, largest in IEA history, including 25% from the US Strategic Petroleum Reserve. The U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve holds 700 million barrels at full capacity and was reduced from 60% to 45% capacity after the release. Brent crude oil price exceeded $104 per barrel despite the emergency oil release. The Strait of Hormuz was blocked for the first time in modern history. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between sources as Thege is a near-identical repost of SMH content. This story was covered by Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia's economic risks from US-Iran conflict and domestic policy fallout. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Barry Cassidy and Tony Barry are co-hosting a Guardian podcast analysing economic fallout from a potential Iran war. The Australian public may blame the Albanese government for economic impacts linked to Trump's war on Iran. The Reserve Bank of Australia, RBA, has raised the cash rate. Liberal MP Andrew Hastie has criticised US President Trump and distanced himself from his policies. Treasurer Jim Chalmers is described as opening the door for a possible recession. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Man charged with murder after elderly body found in Victoria's Jung, court hearing details. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Robert Beck, 49, from Minyip was charged with murder in Horsham Magistrates Court on June 2024. The victim was an elderly man, believed to be in his 80s, found dead near the intersection of Henty HWY and Finlayson Road in Jung, Victoria, on Monday morning at approximately 9:15 a.m. Beck was arrested on Monday night at Firebrace St, Horsham, after police found him behaving erratically and in possession of a knife. Beck was diagnosed with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and borderline personality disorder. The prosecutor stated the victim sustained 24 injuries. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reported Beck was arrested at Firebrace St in Horsham on Monday night, while Newscomau stated he was located on Firebrace St but did not specify the exact time of arrest. ABC mentioned Beck was dressed in a black hoodie during the hearing, but Newscomau did not describe his attire. ABC stated Beck's heavy breathing was audible from the far corner of the courtroom, while Newscomau did not mention this detail. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Hawaii faces severe flash flooding, dam failure risks, and mass evacuations due to extreme storms. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Thousands of residents in northern Oahu were ordered to evacuate, with numbers ranging from 4,000 to 5,500 people across multiple sources. The Wahiawa Dam on Oahu was at risk of imminent failure or high hazard potential, with water actively running over its spillway at 1,500 gallons per second, mentioned in Guardian and ABC. Evacuation orders were issued for Waialua and Haliwa on Oahu's North Shore, with a Leave Now directive issued at 5:35 a.m. on Friday, Guardian and ABC. A shelter at Waialua High School and Intermediate School was evacuated due to flooding, housing about 185 people and 50 pets, Guardian and ABC. Heavy rainfall from Kona low winter storms caused widespread life-threatening flash flooding, with parts of Oahu receiving 8 to 12 inches, 20 to 30 centimeters, of rain, Guardian and ABC. But not all outlets told the same story. Guardian Article 1 states the evacuation order was issued at 5:35 a.m. on Friday for Waialua and Haliwa, while Guardian Article 2 says the warning came early on Saturday. Guardian Article 1 reports 185 people and 50 pets at Waialua High School shelter, while Guardian Article 2 does not specify the number of pets. Guardian Article 2 claims dozens and perhaps hundreds of homes have been damaged, but ABC does not provide a specific estimate of damaged homes. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Kangaroo Island Council proposes pet cat ban to eradicate feral cats and protect native wildlife. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Kangaroo Island Council is considering a last cat policy to ban new pet cats from the island as part of a feral cat eradication effort. Mayor Michael Pengelly stated the goal is to rid Kangaroo Island of feral cats and not allow any more cats in by 2030. The Dudley Peninsula project has removed 2,800 feral cats, leaving around 150 remaining, with a 95% reduction expected this winter. Feral cats contribute to a $12 million annual decline in sheep production due to toxoplasmosis, according to Mayor Pengelly and Jack Goff. The federal government provided $1.61 million in December 2023, with an additional $800,000 from the state government in March 2024 for the project. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the two sources. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Iran's closure threats and attacks on the Strait of Hormuz during US-Israel war. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Strait of Hormuz is a narrow waterway at the mouth of the Persian Gulf where 20% of the world's oil normally flows, connecting the Gulf to the Arabian Sea. Iran has threatened to close the Strait of Hormuz since the US and Israel launched military operations against Iran in early 2024, with Revolutionary Guard (IRGC) radios broadcasting a message forbidding navigation through the strait. Iran has attacked at least 20 vessels in confirmed incidents since March 1, 2024, including unmanned speedboats ramming ships like the US-owned Safesea Vishnu and Greek-owned Zephyros. Shipping through the Strait of Hormuz dropped from over 2,000 vessels in mid-February 2024 to just 166 vessels by early March 2024, according to marine traffic data. The strait's narrowest point is 30 kilometers wide, with two 3.2-kilometer wide shipping lanes confined between Iran, north, and Oman, south. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian implies Iran has not formally closed the strait, while ABC explicitly reports Iran's IRGC radios declared all navigating through the Strait of Hormuz is forbidden, a formal closure statement. The Guardian does not mention Iran's use of unmanned speedboats or drones in attacks, while ABC details these as key methods of disruption, e.g., Safe Sea Vishnu attack. ABC cites Farzan Nademi stating Iran's closure was planned as a last resort but executed early due to internal regime debates after 2023, while The Guardian does not reference this historical context. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Federal judge blocks Pentagon's 2025 press access policy restricting journalists' rights. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A U.S. federal judge, Paul Friedman, blocked a Pentagon policy introduced in October 2025 that allowed journalists to be labeled security risks and lose press access for seeking unauthorized information. The policy was approved by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth under the Trump administration and revoked credentials of outlets refusing to sign an acknowledgement of the new rules. Of the 56 news outlets in the Pentagon Press Association, only one agreed to sign the new policy, leading to the loss of passes for non-signatories. The Pentagon assembled a new press corps consisting of pro-Trump outlets and media personalities after the exodus of mainstream reporters. The New York Times filed a lawsuit alleging the policy violated First Amendment free speech protections and Fifth Amendment due process rights. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states the policy was introduced under the Trump administration and linked to his actions in Venezuela and Iran, while The Guardian does not emphasize this connection in its reporting. ABC reports the Justice Department argued soliciting unauthorized information could be criminal speech, but The Guardian does not include this specific claim. ABC mentions the Pentagon's policy was criticized as an attack on free press by Trump's administration, while The Guardian frames it as a Trump administration policy without explicitly attributing the criticism to Trump. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Homicide investigation and manslaughter charge in Perth's Banksia Grove over a woman's death. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A 42-year-old woman was found unresponsive at a home in Banksia Grove, Perth's northern suburbs, on Thursday morning around 9 a.m. The woman was declared dead at the scene by paramedics after being unresponsive. The incident occurred on Mayerley Bend, Banksia Grove. A man in his 40s was assisting police with inquiries, Article 1, and later charged, Article 2. Police received the initial report around 9 a.m. on Thursday. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states a man in his 40s is assisting police, while Article 2 specifies a 47-year-old man was arrested and charged. Article 1 does not mention charges or an arrest, while Article 2 states the man was charged with manslaughter. This story was covered by ABC News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Effectiveness of medicinal cannabis for mental health conditions and substance use disorders. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Researchers from the University of Sydney, Brisbane, Melbourne, and Bath reviewed 54 randomized controlled trials involving 2,477 participants for cannabis-based therapies' efficacy in mental health and substance use disorders, published in The Lancet Psychiatry. The review found no significant effects of cannabinoids on anxiety, anorexia nervosa, psychotic disorders, PTSD, or opioid use disorder. Prescriptions for medicinal cannabis in Australia surged from less than 20,000 in 2020 to nearly 1 million in the last financial year. Over 250,000 Australians with anxiety, 19,000 with PTSD, and 17,641 with depression have been prescribed medicinal cannabis since its 2016 legalization in Australia. The review concluded there was very little evidence for its efficacy in treating common mental health conditions, and routine use is rarely justified. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian reports the review found no evidence for cannabis efficacy in treating anxiety and PTSD, but the Cannabis Industry Council claims real-world evidence shows it reduces symptoms of these conditions. The Guardian cites Sir Robin Murray calling UK cannabis clinics drug dealers for the middle class, while the SMH does not include this criticism and focuses on patient experiences. The Guardian states the review found no evidence for cannabis treating depression, but the SMH does not explicitly contradict this and instead highlights patient testimonials like Daniel Yarcole's. This story was covered by The Guardian and Sydney Morning Herald. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Coronial inquest into Bradley John Murdoch's death and unresolved Peter Falconio murder case. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Bradley Murdoch was sentenced to life imprisonment in 2005 for the murder of Peter Falconio and attempted kidnapping of Joanne Lees, with a non-parole period of 28 years. Murdoch died from stage 4 cancer, metastatic throat cancer, in Alice Springs Hospital's palliative care unit on July 16, 2025, 22 years into his sentence. Police made 2 attempts to convince Murdoch to reveal Falconio's remains in the weeks before his death, one at Alice Springs Correctional Center on June 25, 2025, and another in palliative care days before his death. Murdoch refused to watch a video of Falconio's parents, recorded with UK police, during the June 25 visit and yelled at police to get out during the palliative care visit. A $500,000 reward remains for information leading to Falconio's remains, which have never been found despite Murdoch's conviction for his murder. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states Murdoch's cancer was diagnosed in November 2024 after a neck lump complaint, while Guardian does not specify the exact timeline for diagnosis. ABC reports Murdoch's concerns included missed medications and perceived delays, but Guardian does not mention medication issues specifically. ABC highlights occasional delays in treatment were acknowledged but no missed opportunity for earlier diagnosis, while Guardian omits this nuance. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Federal approval of Australia Pacific LNG's coal seam gas expansion in Queensland until 2081. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The federal government approved Australia Pacific LNG's coal seam gas expansion project in Queensland's Surrott and Bowen basins until 2081. The project includes up to 1,695 new gas wells, 1,545 kilometers of gas and water pipelines, and 3 processing facilities. The project is expected to produce about 2,033 petajoules of gas and operate until 2061, with an extended approval period to 2081. The project's public environment report estimated 9 million tons of CO2 emissions during construction and operation, plus 111 million tons from burning the gas. Australia Pacific LNG is a joint venture of ConocoPhillips, Origin Energy, and Sinopec. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian reports the project's total lifetime emissions as 120 million tons, while ABC does not specify a total but focuses on 9 tons during construction and 111 tons from burning gas. The Guardian highlights the project's emissions exceed Australia's annual transport emissions, but ABC does not explicitly compare it to transport emissions. The Guardian states the approval is the 36th fossil fuel project under the Albanese government, while ABC does not mention this specific count. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Sri Lanka and Asia's fuel crisis due to Iran-US-Israel war blocking Strait of Hormuz. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Sri Lanka introduced a 4-day work week for state institutions, schools, and universities starting Wednesday, with the change to remain indefinitely, Newskamau, ABC, Guardian. Iran blocked the Strait of Hormuz on February 28, 2024, in retaliation for US-Israeli airstrikes, cutting 20 to 25% of global oil supply, Newscomau, 20%, ABC, 20%, Guardian, 20 to 25%. Sri Lanka's fuel rationing limits motorists to 15 litres of petrol diesel per week, while public transport gets up to 200 litres, Newscomau, ABC, Guardian. Sri Lanka's petrol and diesel reserves are estimated to last nearly 6 weeks, but officials warn disruptions could severely impact the island, Newscomau, ABC, Guardian. Sri Lanka's President Anura Kumara Dissanayake called an emergency meeting and stated we must prepare for the worst, but hope for the best, Newscomau, ABC, Guardian. But not all outlets told the same story. Newscomau states Sri Lanka's fuel reserves would last nearly 6 weeks but warns of severe impact if supplies were disrupted, while ABC and Guardian only mention the 6-week duration without the severe impact phrasing. Newscomau says Sri Lanka's private sector was asked to declare every Wednesday a holiday, but ABC and Guardian only mention follow suit without specifying Wednesday. Newscomau states Thailand's AC should be set to no less than 26 degrees Celsius and workers should wear short-sleeved shirts, while ABC only mentions the AC temperature but omits the clothing suggestion. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Global energy crisis from Iran war surpassing 1970s oil shocks and Ukraine gas crisis. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Fatih Birol, IEA chief, stated the current energy crisis is worse than the combined 1973 and 1979 oil crises, 5 million barrels day each, plus the 2022 Ukraine gas crisis, 75 BCM lost. The IEA reports 11 million barrels of oil lost per day in the current crisis, exceeding the 10 million barrels lost in the two 1970s oil shocks combined. Iran war has caused 140 billion cubic meters, BCM, of gas lost, nearly double the 75 BCM lost during Russia's Ukraine invasion, per Guardian ABC. The Strait of Hormuz carries 20% of global oil supply and has been effectively shut down due to the Iran conflict, ABC Guardian. IEA member nations released 400 million barrels of oil from strategic stockpiles on March 11, 2024, Guardian ABC. But not all outlets told the same story. Guardian Article 2 reports Brent crude at $112 and WTI just below $100, while ABC does not mention Brent price but only WTI's slight retreat after a 1.8% spike, no direct contradiction but differing emphasis. Guardian Article 2 states New Zealand would not follow Australia in relaxing fuel standards for higher sulfur fuel, while ABC does not mention this detail, no contradiction but omission. Guardian Article 2 reports Vietnam's petrol prices up 50% and diesel up 70%, but ABC does not mention these specific percentages, no contradiction. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. ABC staff strike over rejected pay agreement and workplace conditions. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. More than 75% of ABC staff, 75% of total workforce, voted no to the revised enterprise agreement on Sunday, with 60% of voting staff rejecting the offer. The rejected pay offer included a 10% total pay rise over 3 years, 3.5% in year 1, 3.25% in years 2 and 3, plus a one-off $1,000 payment excluding casual staff. The strike is scheduled to begin at 11 a.m. on Wednesday and last 24 hours, disrupting live broadcasts and recorded media across TV, radio, and online. Unions, MEAA and CPSU, cite unresolved issues including staff appraisals, career progression, night shift penalty rates, and reproductive health leave as reasons for rejecting the offer. The last major ABC strike occurred in 2006, involving a 24-hour walkout that disrupted TV and radio services. But not all outlets told the same story. Newscomau states only 40% of voting staff approved the pay agreement, while The Guardian reports 60% of voting staff rejected it, implied 40% approved, but no explicit 40% figure. Newscomau does not mention the 75% workforce participation rate in the ballot, while The Guardian explicitly states the ballot involved 75% of the total workforce. The Guardian highlights the 2023 strike was narrowly avoided due to David Anderson's intervention, but Newscomau does not reference this event. This story was covered by The Guardian and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australian government response to fuel crisis caused by Middle East conflict and Strait of Hormuz blockade. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Anthony Albanese is convening a national cabinet meeting on Thursday, 2024 date unspecified, to coordinate a national response to the fuel crisis triggered by the US-Israel strikes on Iran and ongoing Middle East conflict. The federal government has released nearly 1/5, 20%, of Australia's domestic petrol and diesel reserves to address shortages, with 100 million litres month injected into the market for 60 days by relaxing fuel standards. The Strait of Hormuz carries about 20% of global oil supply, and its blockade by Iran has disrupted Australian fuel shipments, with at least 6 ships destined for Australia cancelled due to the conflict. Fuel prices have risen sharply globally since Iran's blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, with Australian farmers and truckers reporting shortages in rural regional areas. Energy Minister Chris Bowen stated Australia's fuel supply remains very solid, with all deliveries arriving as expected so far, despite Strait of Hormuz risks. But not all outlets told the same story. Newscomau states Albanese explicitly blamed massive surge in demand for shortages, while Thege and Guardian emphasise supply chain disruptions and Strait of Hormuz risks as primary causes. Guardian and ABC report the government is doubling penalties for fuel companies to $100 million per offence, but Newscomau does not mention this legislative plan. Thege and SMH report the coalition is considering lifting Russian fertilizer sanctions to avoid food inflation, but Newscomau and ABC do not mention this policy proposal. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. 2026 Women's Asian Cup Final between Australia's Matildas and Japan. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Women's Asian Cup Final was played on March 21, 2026, at Stadium Australia in Sydney, Australia. Japan won the Women's Asian Cup Final 1-0 against Australia, with Mika Hameno scoring the only goal in the 15th minute. The match was attended by a record crowd of approximately 74,000 fans at Stadium Australia. Sam Kerr scored a goal in the Matildas' 2-1 semi-final victory over China on March 17, 2026, at Perth Stadium. Caitlin Ford scored the opening goal for Australia in the 17th minute of the semi-final against China. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reported the Matildas' semi-final crowd as 35,170, while The Guardian reported a near-sellout crowd of 74,397 for the final, but the consensus is that the final crowd was 74,000 to 74,397. The Guardian described the Matildas' semi-final against China as a gutsy 2-1 defeat with a penalty awarded to China, while ABC described it as a touch-and-go 2-1 win with no mention of a penalty. ABC mentioned that the Matildas' semi-final against North Korea was played at Stadium Australia, while The Guardian and other sources did not specify the venue for that match. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian and SBS News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. US military spending and humanitarian costs of the Iran conflict in early 2026. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The US spent approximately $11.3 billion in the first 6 days of its military strikes on Iran, 5 February-March 2026, according to Pentagon officials briefing lawmakers. The Pentagon's $11.3 billion estimate excludes costs like force deployment, medical expenses, infrastructure repairs, and pre-war buildup, per multiple sources. Over 1,300 people have been killed in Iran since the strikes began, including more than 200 children, as reported by at least 2 sources. The Environmental Protection Agency's 2026 budget is $8.8 billion, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's is $9.2 billion, and the National Cancer Institute's is $7.4 billion, all dwarfed by the first week's war spending. A girls' school in Minab, southeastern Iran, was destroyed by a U.S. strike, killing about 175 children and teachers, per 2 sources. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states the Pentagon's $11.3 billion figure was limited to munitions and excluded other costs, while Article 2 implies the $11.3 billion is the total war cost for the first week, without clarifying exclusions. Article 1 cites CSIS $12.7 billion estimate by day 6, but Article 3 reports Hassett's $12 billion figure as the total since the 28th of February, no day-specific breakdown. Article 3 claims over 1,300 deaths in Iran, including 200 children, while Article 1 states more than 3,000 people are believed to have been killed, a discrepancy in total fatalities. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Pauline Hanson's One Nation surge benefiting Labour in Australian elections via electoral system dynamics. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Pauline Hanson stated it's just the start regarding One Nation's political momentum after the election. One Nation secured 20% of the vote in the election. Liberal Party vote collapsed to 19% as counting continued. Labour's vote remained stable at 39% despite Conservative fragmentation. The Greens increased their vote to 11%. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the 2 articles. This story was covered by Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Israeli strike on Iran's South Pars gas field triggers regional energy crisis and retaliation. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Israel bombed Iranian facilities linked to the South Pars gas field, the largest natural gas field in the world, shared with Qatar, ABC, Guardian, ABC, Guardian, 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 ABC, Guardian. Iran retaliated by launching strikes on Qatar's Ras Laffan gas complex, causing extensive damage and knocking out about 17%, or 12.8 m year, of its LNG export capacity, ABC, Guardian, 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 ABC, Guardian. Qatar Energy estimated $20 billion in damage to Ras Laffan and repairs could take 3 to 5 years, ABC, Guardian, Guardian, Guardian. Iran's Revolutionary Guards warned that Saudi Arabia's Samref refinery, Yanbu, UAE's Al Hosn gas field, and Qatar's Mesaieed petrochemical complex were direct and legitimate targets, Guardian, Guardian, Guardian. Brent crude oil prices spiked to around $110 to $119 per barrel following the strikes, ABC, Guardian, 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 ABC. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC and Guardian both report Trump claimed he knew nothing about the South Pars attack, but Israeli officials and Yoel Gazansky, from Tel Aviv's Institute of National Security Studies, stated the US was informed or even coordinated the attack. Trump said he told Netanyahu not to attack South Pars again, but Israeli officials claimed Israel acted alone and Netanyahu denied being dragged into the war by the US. The Guardian reports Trump's Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth accused the press of trying to portray the US as spinning toward an endless abyss, while Trump's messaging on Truth Social and public statements were inconsistent and chaotic. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Former Liberal staffer Bruce Lehrmann faces Queensland rape trial in November 2024. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Bruce Lehrmann, 30, is charged with 2 counts of rape alleged to have occurred in Toowoomba in October 2021. The trial is scheduled to begin on November 2, 2024, in the Toowoomba District Court. Judge Deborah Richards set the trial date during a court mention on July 2024. Lehrman has not yet formally entered a plea but has previously indicated he would plead not guilty. Defense lawyer Zali Burrows is representing Lehrman and has not yet decided whether the case will proceed before a judge or jury. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC mentions Lehrman was a former Liberal staffer based in Canberra, while Newscomau only states he was a Canberra-based staffer without specifying former. No contradictions in trial date, charges, or key figures, both sources align on core facts. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Amazon's Jury Duty TV hoax series and its second season, Company Retreat, featuring unsuspecting participants. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The original Jury Duty series premiered in 2023 on Amazon's Freevee platform. Ronald Gladden was the unsuspecting lead actor in Jury Duty Season 1, believing he was participating in a documentary about a jury trial. Jury Duty Season 1 won a Peabody Award for bringing out the best in people through reality television. Anthony Norman from Nashville was the unsuspecting lead actor in Jury Duty Presents, Company Retreat, Season 2. Over 10,000 people applied for the role of the unsuspecting lead in Jury Duty Presents, Company Retreat via Craigslist. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states the cash prize for the unsuspecting lead in Jury Duty Presents, Company Retreat was $150,000, while Article 2 claims the original Jury Duty Season 1 prize was $100,000 without specifying the second season's prize amount. Article 1 describes Anthony Norman's reactions as often playful and engaging, while Article 2 portrays him as showing sheer boredom during the retreat's absurdities. Article 1 emphasizes the extensive preparation and meticulous planning behind the second season, including building structures and rehearsing intricate details, while Article 2 focuses more on the show's darker or more bizarre elements without detailing the production's efforts. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis.